the message is over and over again, you've got to put your faith in God. You cannot put your faith in man, no matter how much you like the man, no matter how wise you think the man is because we are subject to not only error, we are subject to terrible error. And that's a particularly good message when you're in show business. You tend to not look at anything you do with absolutes.
Demystifying the mystical and celebrating the ordinary moments of grace in our lives. This is Ordinary Grace. I'm Matt Guerrero. Welcome to the conversation. This week we'll speak with Stephen Tobolowsky, actor, storyteller, and host of the popular podcast, The Tobolowsky Files. In this discussion, Stephen discusses the difficulties of emoting via Zoom, rediscovering Judaism as a working actor, our challenges in the face of the unprecedented calamities of 2020, and what hope we can have for the future. How are you and your family adjusting to life in 2020? All these changes, everything that is happening in the world. Beyond that, what is the life of an actor like in this time? Are you able to take any projects?
I guess going from the macro to the micro, it's terribly difficult. Life is terribly difficult, and you realize right off the bat what social creatures we are.
Yeah.
And how we learn and we live depending upon what we see. And so since we see nothing now, like I'm seeing my wife a lot.
Yeah.
And we go nowhere because we have big targets painted on our back with COVID. We're both in our 60s, and let's see, I had open heart surgery and Ann has pre-diabetes. So we both are like, okay,
yeah.
let's take this one seriously. So we spend a lot of times indoors. Fortunately, I have time to write. So I've been able to write a lot, but I have this formula that I came up with many years ago, and there's two sort of horrible things in life. One is that you live your life without having a formula.
Mm-hmm.
That's torture. The other thing is that you live your life, and as a young man, you come up with a formula, and you find out you were right. And then you go, oh my God, I'm living in this hell of my own making. So this is my formula. It's the input-output formula. If you have too much input and not enough output, you become anxious. If you have too much output and not enough input, you become depressed. And so you live your life between these two poles of being anxious or being depressed. So moving further down the digestive track of macro to micro is that as an actor now, we are not able to work really at all. The studios are pretty much closed. Mm-hmm. There are all sorts of contingency plans on how to get us back to work. I just got a call on Friday that they want me back on the Goldbergs, on the next Goldbergs that they're going to shoot. And what that means is that I have to have my COVID test, but fortunately the Goldbergs has their own doctor. So you drive out to Sony Studios 48 hours before you shoot. They give you a COVID test. And if it's negative, then you social distance while you get hair and makeup. And when you go on the set, you shoot wearing masks. And then for the take, you take your masks off and you shoot without your mask. And you roll the dice. And like my wife said, at some point in time, you gotta roll the dice. And so I am rolling the dice later this year. But generally, there is no work, there is no acting. So what you do is, as an actor, you scrounge. You can do crossword puzzles, you can practice the piano, you could do gardening, you could read, and you could do Zoom plays. And I mentioned to you that we've been doing a lot of Zoom plays, which are kind of like looking at a department store security camera. You have all these boxes with actors doing this kind of thing.
It must feel a little like people watching a voice acting session, like a voiceover session. It must feel a bit like people are spying in on that process.
That is a great way to look at it, actually, Matt. That is a fabulous way to look at it, because the biggest problem people have with Zoom is that Stanislavski, you know who Stanislavski was, great Russian director, acting coach. In fact, what we get method acting is from Stanislavski back in the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And he basically said all life on stage exists in the eyes of the other character, of the partner you're talking with. That's where life on stage comes from, is from the eyes of your acting partner. Well, in Zoom, you have no eyes of an acting partner.
Right.
You can't see them. You see the boxes, but you can't look at the boxes because you have to look at the little light up there where the camera is, or it looks like you've lost some change and you're looking in the car seat. You're looking like
yes,
this.
Even in this conversation, I put you in front of the camera so we could kind of make semi-eye contact.
and when on stage, and especially in comedy, a lot of comedy comes from actor A's reaction to actor B. Like actor B does something incredibly stupid, and actor A just looks at them and the audience laughs. You can't do that in a Zoom play, because as soon as you don't do anything, the viewing audience thinks that there is a Wi-Fi glitch and the camera's frozen. They think it's some sort of technical problem.
Sure.
So there is no life between the eyes of the other character. So you're trapped. So it's not good. So this is what we do. And everyone is scrounging to try to stay alive. And there aren't that many options. That's the problem. There aren't that many options that consistently work.
What are some of the Zoom plays you've done?
Boy, at the Road Theater here in Los Angeles, we had a New Writers Festival. And so in that festival, my wife directed 2 shows, 2 full-length plays. And my wife and I acted in 1 full-length play. And I wrote and directed a 1-act play, a short play. And so we were involved with that for probably 2 months of rehearsing and recording and getting that prepared. I've been working on my podcast, The Tobolowsky Files. I've been doing that.
That was on hiatus, right? Or is it back now?
Well, there is no schedule. So it's like having Labor Day. I don't know when this is going to air, but yesterday in 2020 was Labor Day. What the hell is the good of Labor Day if there is no labor? It is just another day to watch a golf tournament.
Right.
But at least they have new golf on now instead of just watching old golf like we used to watch.
Yeah.
So it is, in terms of the Tobolowsky Files, I started, this may be interesting, I don't know, because this was another period of crisis for me. In 2008, I broke my neck riding on a horse on the side of an active volcano in Iceland.
As you do.
As you do, it brings judgment into question.
What this was on a vacation or during a film shoot, or?
No, it was a vacation. My wife and I loved riding, especially Annie. She was an equestrian when she was a girl, and I was just taking it up. And our trainer was from Iceland. So he worked here in Los Angeles, and he invited us over to his home, where his father is the world record holding rider of Icelandic horses ever. He's in the Guinness Book of Records. He doesn't have a closet or a room dedicated to trophies. He has, drumroll, a warehouse in Helsinki, not Helsinki, Reykjavik, I forget these countries, in Reykjavik, a warehouse where you could go in and see all of his trophies. So we would be able to go there, have lessons with him, and then go on a trail ride.
Well, I guess if you have to trust somebody with your...
Yes. So we went to Iceland 3 different summers. And each summer, something catastrophic almost happened. But this 3rd summer, This third summer was the real deal. My horse was in the lead on Mount Hetla, and they have giant winds coming off the Atlantic Ocean, and the wind picked me and my horse off the ground, and began carrying us like a tornado, and then dropped us onto a hardened lava flow. The horse took this as God telling it to get out of here.
Of course.
And he took off, and I'm hanging on for dear life, and I fall onto the lava flow. And the other riders came to my rescue. They said that they found me in a fetal position on the only piece of vegetation on this basaltic rock. Wow. And I got up, jumped on the spare horse that they brought, said I felt sick. I said I felt sick. And they said, well, maybe you were hurt in the fall. And I said, what fall? And they said, get off the horse. They took me to the hospital in Reykjavik, and they said that I had a probable fracture of the neck. So they gave me a one-size-fits-all Icelandically issued neck brace, and I stayed there for the next 10 days eating hot dogs. I come back to the United States and go to my doctor, who said, you were misdiagnosed in Iceland. You have a fatal injury. And I'm going, well, you know, I like to write, and words do have meanings, and fatal has a meaning. Yeah. So it's obviously not fatal. And he said, the reason I'm alive is because I have an anomaly of anatomy. My neck, the cervical spine, has a certain C shape to it, kind of is that a reverse C?
Yes, yeah.
But mine was bent the opposite way because of arthritis. And so a lot of the blow went out into my shoulders instead of in snapping my neck.
Wow.
So I'm in a neck brace. Now, how does this go to the Tobolowsky files? It's not that big of a jump. Yeah. I actually couldn't do anything with the broken neck. I couldn't act. I couldn't work. So I thought, since I almost died, I would write some stories of my life for my kids as a legacy, since they would know their father. So I began writing stories of what I did as a kid, and the first girl I fell in love with, and first jobs I had going into show, but all sorts of like true stories, life, love, and Hollywood, all sorts of things. At that point in time, a student from Harvard, David Chen, called me up and said, I love your storytelling in the movie Stephen Tobolowsky's Birthday Party, which was a real movie they did of me telling true stories. And he said, would you like to do true stories as a podcast? And I said, what's a podcast? I have no idea. Right. This is before the age of... And so he says, you write the stories and I'll record them. And that became the Tobolowsky files. And as a footnote, my kids never listened to the story.
Of course.
The story, of course. So we ended up doing about 25 or 30 of these stories. And then Simon & Schuster said, can we do a book of these stories? So I go like, sure. So we did that. And then we kept doing stories. And Simon & Schuster said, can you do another book? So I did a second book, My Adventures with God, which includes more stories and new stories. And now those 25 stories, we have about 83. Each one's about an hour, and they're true stories from my life. Now they've been on NPR. Now they've been all over the world. People hear them everywhere, and they're free of charge. We don't charge for the podcast. It's all free. That, of course, we made that decision.
Did that take some getting used to as an actor? The idea of just putting this out?
No, I loved it because when you do it for free, nobody can tell you what to do. And you're in charge of yourself. So David and I do this, and doing it for free, I got 2 books out of it. I got a trip to New Zealand. They wanted me to go over there and do stories in their theater. I got 3 trips to England, 1 trip to Ireland, 1 trip to Scotland to do stories in Edinburgh. So all of these things went all over the world, and I got side tangential benefits from it. So I am enjoying sitting at home, writing podcasts, and by the time we finish recording, in fact, David and I are going to record when we finish this podcast here,
Mm-hmm.
we should be close to 100 podcasts.
Wow.
Yeah, so that will be fun. And they're all true and all enjoyable, and some are showbiz related and some are just how to get through the day.
Do you think that you've had a more interesting life than others, or that your facility as a storyteller allows you to bring that out where other people might not? I mean, you have some really fantastic stories, obviously.
Well,
so you have.
I think it's a lot of different things. One is I have a better memory than most. I don't have one of those trick memories like Marilu Henner.
Right.
She could remember every damn thing she ever saw in her life. I mean, it's just amazing what she knows how much change she picked up at a deli like 15 years ago.
My friend once was at a party with her, and I said, she remembers your face. She doesn't even know your name. She remembers your face.
It's a freak thing. I don't have a memory like that, but I have a good memory. And also throughout my whole life, I took notes for some reason. So I have notes from when I was in junior high and high school and college, all with names and places and faces to jar my memory. And I wrote down little stories, and now I keep everything on my iPhone. So I have, thousands of little bits of stories. And so I kind of put them together in I guess you would say a philosophical construct as to tie various stories together. So I think I have a good memory. I think I've always been a pretty good storyteller. I've enjoyed great storytellers in my life. Like, I always think, like, whenever I do a writing workshop, I tell the writers, think about 3 great writers you love. Think about great philosophers you admire, and see if you could weave that together somehow. So my 3 great writers, Charles Dickens, hard to beat him.
Yeah.
And he was paid by the pound. I mean, that's but literally paid by the pound, right? But they paid him for however many parts of a story you wanted, because he wrote it as a serial. So they paid him X amount, and you have a 400-page book that was out in the newspaper in installments, or another amount, and he did an 800-page book.
Yeah.
It just, however much you paid him, that's how much he wrote. And each of his chapters is a beautiful 10 to 12 pages, very readable to my boys at night. I remember William, my youngest William, he had dyslexia when he was little. And everybody said, oh, he needs special ed and all of this stuff. He can't read. He can't write. He can't do anything. So at night, I began reading him David Copperfield, like a chapter a night. And I said, do you want to take a look at the picture they have here in the book? And you want to follow the words with my finger? He says, no, Daddy. He says, the pictures in my mind are more beautiful than anything I would see in a book. Of course, William just graduated with honors from Johns Hopkins. Thank you very much. Yes, nothing wrong with being dyslexic.
Yes,
out there.
That's beautiful.
But, Charles Dickens, George Eliot, who's really Mary Ann Evans, but she wrote Silas Marner, Middlemarch, Adam Bede. Oh my God. There is no greater writer than George Eliot. And Charles Dickens delivered her eulogy in saying, what can we do now that the sage of all sages has passed away? Nobody can touch George Eliot, but she doesn't have the volume that Charles Dickens has. And then my third writer would be Maxim Gorky. And when I had this job in college reading to this blind woman, I discovered Maxim Gorky. Because when you're in college, you read weird stuff like Gorky. But he wrote My Childhood, my apprenticeship, and my universities. Basically 3 books of short stories. And he is mind-blowing because Gorky not only knows how to write a story, but he knows you don't have to start at the beginning of a story. He would sometimes start a story at the end. And, me and me and Gregor, I'm making these names. Me and Gregor were playing down by the river, and that's when we saw Boris's head on a pike. And I'm going like, what? This is
Start
the
where it
first
matters.
paragraph. They started with the guy's head on a stick. Now where do we go? And his stories are so fantastic and so short. Those three writers, and then three philosophers I always think of: Plato, Epicurus, and Aristotle. And this is how those guys work. Aristotle is kind of what I've been doing right here, talking to you now, and that is talking about the logic of everything that exists on the surface. Is that everything is connected by a logic, and if you find the logic, everything is understandable and perceivable. Then you have Plato, who was Aristotle's teacher. He precedes Aristotle. Plato believed, no, that there is a world of forms, he called it, that exists under the world of what we see and what we think as logic. There are forces beyond what we can reckon with that cause movements. And I guess I always thought about it, because I love geology, tectonics, the idea of the tectonic plates, that actually there's this magma or forces underneath the earth and the rotation of the earth and the magnetic pull of the earth that causes the plates on top to shift. So if you just look at the plate shifting like Aristotle would, you may miss the idea that there are bigger forces that we are not necessarily aware of under. And so Plato is, in terms of writing, I look, maybe the idea of a story has to have logic, but also it has to have forces underneath it that move it around. And then you have Epicurus, who I guess has to be one of the first hippies. Epicurus really didn't believe in much of anything. He believed that the greatest thing man could attain is friendship. Give me a break. But Epicurean, good food, good wine, wine, women's song. We love that. But Epicurus had one idea that always stuck with me, and that is that the universe is so vast, it is unknowable. However, we have a clue, a key, and that is we could understand everything about the universe in a puddle of water. Instead of looking up, look down, and you may find the answer where you least expect it. He says, every grain of sand, every leaf on the tree. Oh, sounds like a Bob Dylan song.
It does.
Yeah. Every puddle of water, the lesson of the truth of the entire universe is captured there if you just look at it and see it. So in terms of storytelling, I think of like short and sweet, begin strong, have great suspense like George Eliot, and I think incorporate some of the ideas of these philosophers for me. Have a logic that brings the reader along, have forces moving beneath the story, and understand you don't have to look at the heavens to understand the heavens. You could understand the heavens by looking at your rabbit cage. You could understand the heavens right here, right in front of you.
What was your spiritual upbringing? What tradition were you raised in, and where do you find yourself today?
Texas Jew, and not even Texas Jew, because there were a lot of Jews in North Dallas. In Oak Cliff, there were 3 Jewish families. 3. I was surrounded not just by what you would call a Christian faith, but definitely like out there further, like the Baptists were middle of the road,
Really?
No music, the no singing, that was like maybe middle of the road. Maybe they were the left wingers. We had some, I wouldn't say we had snake handlers, but it was more toward that end of very
like a fire and brimstone?
Fire and brimstone. fundamentalist. We were surrounded by that. And I grew up in the synagogue we went to in Dallas. They only had 3 synagogues. They had the Orthodox synagogue that my father's family went to, but Dad never really got any Jewish training. So that was out. Then there was the middle of the road, the conservative synagogue. No. But we went to the Reform synagogue, Temple Emmanuel, which is not too far from Episcopalian. Unitarian.
I've got it. Yeah.
It's like we read the Bible, we enjoyed the Bible, and I guess
a little bit of a take a penny, leave a penny kind of face,
Yeah,
what you might like. Yeah.
We didn't observe that many, like on the Sabbath. We didn't light the candles or say the prayers or do anything in our home like right now I do with my wife every Friday night. In Judaism, it's Friday night, Saturday, because of the way we count our calendar. And we weren't that observant growing up. And then I guess I felt like I was missing something in my life. And I was working on a movie, Radioland Murders, with Larry Miller, who's a great actor, great comic, great writer. And he says, well, want to come to my synagogue? It's a little synagogue in Studio City, California, you're not far down the street from where you live. And it's in someone's house. It's just a little place. We have a few people each Saturday morning. So I started going there. And the rabbi was Rabbi Meyer Schimmel, who was an old German Jew. I remember the day I found him, I decided I was, okay, here's a terrible, here's the crisis. So I got a big job, a big acting job for ABC television to be a regular on a sitcom. Finally, I struck it rich. And we were going to shoot on the high holy days, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I had not been to a synagogue in 20, 30 years. Hadn't gone in. I always promised my mother I would. Every year I said, Mom, this year I'm going to go to the synagogue, but I never did. And then Barry Kemp, who did Coach and all sorts of great shows, he was our executive producer. He said, now, is anyone here Jewish? Because we are shooting the first shows on Rosh Hashanah and maybe Yom Kippur. And Richard Kind, who was in the show, said, Barry, the only Jews here are me and Tobolowsky. We're the best kind of Jews at all because we don't believe in anything. and the sting of the truth of that really hurt. So that night I was tossing and turning and turning and tossing, and I got up crack of dawn and I said, I'm going to find Larry Miller's synagogue. I'm going to find Larry Miller's synagogue. And I got in my car and I started driving over. All I knew was it was on Moore Park Street and it was in a house. So I knew it was close to me. So I'm driving down Moore Park looking for something that looked Jewish. No idea of an address. And there was a little house next to a little restaurant with the Star of David on the roof. And I thought, this got to be it. And there was an old man in front sweeping up leaves, wearing a leather jacket, a little cap. Mm-hmm. And I got out of the car and go, excuse me, is this a synagogue? And the little old man goes, yeah, this is a synagogue. And I said, okay, I need to come to High Holy Day services this year. He says, you can't. I go, what do you mean you can't? He says, there are no tickets. I said, oh, come on. You got to have a ticket. You got to have a ticket. He says, I'm sorry. It'd be nice, but there are no tickets. We full up. There's no tickets. And I start going back to my car and I come back to him. I says, okay, listen, I don't need a seat. I will stand at the back. He says, I would love to have you do that, but we can't. There are no seats, nothing. I said, I will do anything. I will sit outside the door and you could open the door. You have to understand, I need to come to services this year. I have to. And he says, I'd like to help you, but I can't. I said, do you know when the rabbi's going to be here? Because I could talk to him. He goes, well, I'm the rabbi here. I'm also in charge of sweeping the street. I'm telling you, you know, there are no seats. I said, well, my friend Larry Miller told me that I could come here. Listen, you don't understand. He says, well, this is what I think I understand. I think I understand that maybe it's been years since you've been to a synagogue. And maybe you don't know your Hebrew. And maybe you don't know the prayers anymore. Is what I think I understand. But I tell you what, why don't you come to Saturday services, Saturday morning services, see if you like what we do, and then we'll think about Rosh Hashanah. And I'm thinking like, oh, I've been schnunkered. This guy just roped me into coming into Saturday services. So I said, okay, I'll come to Saturday services and see if I like. And I came home and I told Ann, I got to go to Sabbath services. And she goes, what? I said, I promised this old Jewish rabbi I'd come. And so I go to services, and I remember I sat at the back row and opened up the prayer book, and I didn't remember anything, didn't know anything. And the rabbi said, now we're going to sing this song in Hebrew, of course, which I had no idea what it was. He says, put our prayer books down, and now we all will sing. So I kind of don't put my prayer book down. I'm sitting on the back row, and there are only 12 people there, so they're all standing up, and I'm at the back kind of looking around. And he goes, without looking at me, he says, now is not the time to be looking at your prayer book. Now is the time to stand and sing. And he says, just stand and sing. And so I stand up. I'm still holding the prayer book. He says, no. Without looking at me, we don't need our prayer books now. And he goes, again, I understand that maybe you don't know Hebrew. And some of us here, we don't know our prayers or this song, but all you have to do is sing la, la, la. I know Hebrew very well. I'll do it all for you. And I thought, well, this guy is for me. And I ended up going to this synagogue for the next 15 years. Wow. Every Saturday service, I was there. Every Saturday service, I did every prayer service afterwards. I went from knowing no Hebrew at all to, by the end of the decade, I was helping with High Holy Day services. And every week he would teach me something new, and he would challenge me. He says, read this psalm and we'll discuss this next week. And, and so next Saturday after services, we get into these big Talmudic discussions about whatever his assignment was. And it opened my mind to the brilliance, of the Bible, which completely passed me by when I was young. I mean, you read all these stories and you miss the Plato. And you miss the Epicurus. You get the Aristotle, the logic of the story, but you don't see the invisible moving pieces under the story. You don't see, I don't know, for example, like we're coming to the High Holy Day services now, and we're in this period that's the month of Elul in Hebrew, where we examine all of the mistakes we made, certainly in this year and generally in our life, and the way the world has gone off the track. And we're supposed to look at it very seriously. And one of the readings we do, I believe is from 1 Samuel, is the story of Hannah. She comes in and she is childless. And her husband, of course, they had many wives then. He loves her the most, but she's unable to have a child. And the other wives make fun of her. She's at the bottom emotionally, and she comes into a prayer service, which women did not do.
Right.
It was a male thing. Women took care of the home, men took care of the synagogue. She goes into a prayer service and begins praying fervently that if I could become pregnant, I will promise this child to God. And that becomes Samuel. That becomes the priest, the high priest Samuel, who ended up making Saul the king, and all sorts of stuff. Very important guy in the later works. And the priest at the time is watching Hannah, and she's so fervently praying that she's mumbling out loud. And the priest interrupts and says, "Are you drunk, woman?" And she goes, "No." He says, "You're muttering, why are you here? You sound drunk to me." And she says, "I'm praying to God for a child." And I remember my rabbi said, "What do you get from this story?" And I said, one of the things I get from the story is that the rabbi was wrong.
Yeah.
The priest was wrong. Don't put your faith in man. Don't put your faith in priests. The error is there. And I go, how many Bible stories are there in which the holy man is wrong?
Yeah.
I can't think of very many of them. Judaism dwells on stories in which people were supposed to know the answers, like David, or all these people are
the consistent cycle of the Hebrew Bible. Absolutely, failure over and over, a spiral down.
Failure, terrible mistakes over and over again, and the messages over and over again. You've got to put your faith in God. You cannot put your faith in man, no matter how much you like the man, no matter how wise you think the man is because we are subject to not only error, we are subject to terrible error. And that's a particularly good message when you're in show business.
Yeah.
You tend to not look at anything you do with absolutes. You go like, let's do the best we can today. Let's do what we think is right today, and understand we may have to make a course correction tomorrow. That the most we can hope for is mercy, because we can't always pray to be right. That's the one thing, again, coming back to 2020, that I love about the pandemic is the pandemic is never having to say you're sorry, because you say it all the time. My wife and I live in a state of constant error, of constant mistakes, where we are both desperately trying to keep a house together and keep, our love alive and keep our family intact, and doing everything we can to make the right moves. And the right moves are so hard to find in 2020, in the pandemic. So, I find the spiritual lessons come back to me very hard this year.
Yes. I'm just curious, with your deep dive into scripture, did you ever give thought to becoming a rabbi during this time? Or maybe I'm misunderstanding the process of becoming a rabbi.
It's too hard to work. When you're a rabbi, you have to be there for everybody all the time. You don't have time for yourself. If somebody has a birth or a death or a marriage or sickness, you're gone. You have to be gone. It's a terrible, terrible life. But I do like behind me, I don't know if you could see, this is the Talmud over here.
Okay.
Yeah. And over here is the Midrash. Over here are my Torahs and my different commentaries on the Bible and different things. Like, this is our room. My wife and I have too many books. This is a problem of falling in love with somebody who, like you, never left sophomore year of college.
Right.
So right over here, I have Aristotle and Plato. I have philosophers in here. This room only has religion and philosophy. Yeah. So I have Kierkegaard over here, who's stunning. Brilliant. Gandhi. I have all sorts of and said, I have to categorize the books so we know where they are. So we have, take a guess. It's in a podcast, one of the new podcasts that hasn't aired yet. I talk about our books. 4,000 books. It took Anne 2 years with the library program to catalog it. And because of that, this book right here, you see that sideways behind me? Mm-hmm. That is cataloged. It is the book of Hebrew verbs that is challenging because it's so big that it has to go sideways. So it is categorized as sideways in the study, bay 2, shelf 3, horizontally over the Torahs.
I love that so much.
if you take that book down, if you don't want to get on my wife's bad side, you got to put that book right back where it was.
I love that. That is life goals. to have your own Tobolowsky decimal system.
Yes, for sure.
How does your spirituality affect the roles you take or the work you do? Does it?
Well, it does for sure. Like, I think it began to hit me in probably the 90s where I couldn't take certain parts. I would go like, well, I need the job, but do you want to really be a party of putting this out into the world? Mm-hmm. Because that was back when like murder was considered like a form of entertainment. You had slasher films and all sorts of things like that. And I go like, I don't want to be a part of it. And that turned out, I think, to be a good decision of saying like, well, and then you end up working like I am now, One Day at a Time, which is quite a wonderful show. And which has a very strong base of love and people trying to do the right things. Mm-hmm. And again, failing, failing often, but in a very real way and in a very hilarious way, quite often, dealing with subjects, that are out there like sexuality and addiction and cheating, lying.
One thing I always appreciate about the show so much is it does handle those things, but because it is such a well-written and well-acted show, it stays rooted in the characters. So it does not come off preachy, which I think is very important.
It is. That's the thing. It isn't. It is so easy to mistake having a topic, having a moral center, and being judgmental.
Yeah.
It's so easy to play the role of the teacher. And One Day at a Time never does that. One Day at a Time takes it from the position of character, from the position of the situation the character gets in, which can be funny or not funny. And then the characters have to work out of it. All of us know pretty much in life the big rights and wrongs we encounter. We know we don't need someone to slap our hand and said, this is how you should do this is how you should feel. A lot of times there are no answers to what you should do or need to do. There's one character on One Day at a Time who has been an alcoholic and had been sober for years and years and years and years and years and was okay. And then he bumps into his father again and goes off the rails and has to lie about it through the youngest son. Tries to get the youngest son of the family he's friends with to help him lie. Mm-hmm. And the son, now the problem becomes the boy's problem. And the boy's solution is to not go along with it. He said, because I feel like you needed a friend more than you needed a secret.
Yeah.
And I go, as an actor, you read those lines and you go like, somebody has walked there before. That is a fantastic line.
Yeah.
And One Day at a Time does that all the time. You know, we had some good news about One Day at a Time. You know, we had good news. We were on Netflix for 3 years.
Right. Yeah.
And we doubled our audience each year. But then for some reason, Netflix didn't pick us up for a fourth year. So we were picked up by Pop TV, which is in the Viacom family. And with the pandemic, the network collapsed. Not One Day at a Time, Pop TV could not continue because they couldn't continue shooting shows.
Right.
And so One Day at a Time, we still were getting 1 million viewers on regular TV, on Pop TV. But we could only do 6 shows this year, then Pop TV collapses. CBS just picked us up.
Excellent.
To show. So in October, I think starting like the second week of October, we're going to show on CBS, regular CBS, Monday nights at 9:00, I believe, 2 shows back to back. We're going to do the original shows we did for Pop TV, those 6.
Okay.
And if that goes well, we may be picked up by some network in the CBS family, hopefully, either CBS or CBS All Access. It would be a dream come true for us. So One Day at a Time is still there, and it's phenomenal news for all of us. And we're just, it's never happened in television history that you've had a show that has been picked up without having failed. You know, another show carries the torch and says, like, we're going to keep it going because the show is too good for it to go on, because we still have the writers and we still have the cast.
Yeah.
And as long as
it's a miracle you were all able to stay together too.
Yes. We have Justina Machado and Rita Moreno as, you know, I mean, you got those 2 ladies. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah. I mean, what would you think? I mean, young Stephen Tobolowsky, you told him in 50 years, you'll be working with Rita Moreno every day. Come on.
Rita and I were doing one of the last shows of the Netflix series, the 3rd year on Netflix. We were doing our last show, and it was a big party scene. And I was sitting there, and I was telling Rita a story about how when I was 14 years old, I would come home and I had one of these little record players that just had little tiny speakers, and that had wires connected to it, nothing fancy. We used to listen to Child's records on it, but I bought West Side Story because I was so taken with this actress, Rita Moreno. And I said, Rita, I used to lay on my back when I was 14 with a speaker in each ear, listening to you do America.
Yeah.
And I thought, someday I would like to be an actor like Rita Moreno. And I said, Rita, I remember I was so excited when you won the Academy Award. I didn't know how difficult it was then for someone who was Latinx, or however you would say that now, to win an Academy Award for Best Actress. I didn't know that was a bridge that had to be crossed. But with the talent, nobody has the talent Rita has. Nobody is a Rita Moreno. And I remember what I always said about Rita is, Rita Moreno is proof that there is a God and proof that God plays favorites. Nobody has her talent.
Or that presence. Yeah.
Oh, she's just magnificent. Just magnificent.
Two more questions that come out of reading My Adventures with God. And it kind of goes to the kind of trouble we're having right now. You're writing about the Kennedy assassination in the 60s. And this is a quote from you. The unraveling of civilization doesn't require armies or revolutions. All that is required is for one too many people to be looking the wrong way at the wrong time. Do you think that we're watching civilization unraveling or just going through growing pains with everything that is happening this year?
I feel it's a little like Charles Dickens' description of the French Revolution, that it unravels. Uh, I used to have a maid who never cleaned anything, but she was an old maid. She lived in, I think, San Antonio, came out to California, and my old girlfriend Beth and I, we couldn't get rid of her because we loved her so much. Her name was Minnie, and she had to be in her 70s. Never did a lick of work, but she came from Watts, came over to the house, pretended to do stuff for several hours, and then I drove her back to Watts. And I remember one time, again, these lessons you get from people, profound lessons. I said, Minnie, how are you feeling today? She goes, Stephen, well, my hip and my knee feel pretty good, but my shoulder feels like it's 120, and my ankle feels like it's 200 years old. Stephen, you don't die all at once. You die a little bit at a time, and you have to watch for it. And now, in the times we're living in, I feel we are in the age of many, where we are quite possibly dying a little bit at a time when we don't respect what it is that keeps us going. The thing that keeps anybody going is the truth. The truth is the only thing that keeps people going. And when too many people fabricate, when too many people lie, when too many people don't accurately respond to what's happening, it's the theory of slope. You familiar with the theory of slope? You do sand in a sand pile. All kids remember this. You pile the sand up and it builds up into a nice thing, and then suddenly, boom, it settles. And that's because gravity finally reaches a point where there is no friction with the sand grains, and gravity is greater than the friction, and it settles. And we could be at one of those theory of slope moments where one too many people is looking the wrong way at the wrong time. And however it turns out, we will not be the same after this. I'm pretty sure of that. I don't see how that could be possible.
Having lived through the 60s, and obviously much younger then, is there a one-to-one, or is this more chaotic than the 60s were?
It's more chaotic because we're more connected. There was more isolation, and so you didn't have everybody looking at the same Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, the same TV channel. Back in the 60s, we read the Dallas Morning News about the Kennedy assassination and watched Walter Cronkite doing the news at night. That was our source of news. You know, that was it. We weren't bombarded daily with 40 or 50 stories, of which maybe 48 are not true at all. Yeah. And so you're going like, what's this? What happened here? You know, and so what happens is people stop listening. They don't go to newspapers or television for news. They don't do that anymore. Instead, they make it up in their heads. It's the book of Stephen and the book of Matt. You know, we make it up in our head, and we operate under our own sensibilities, which, like in the book of Samuel, will be flawed, will be mistaken as well. And so that's the danger of where we are now. And I remember my mother used to tell me, Stephen, don't lie. You have one word. And once you give that away, you never get it back again. And so cherish your word. Make your word as truthful as you could possibly make it. Don't use it for a manipulation, because once you give your word away, it's gone and it won't come back. That's cheery.
It is. Well, okay. How do we get through this? Just staying true to our word? Is that how we get through it? Or how do we save ourselves? Or will we save ourselves?
We may not. It becomes a matter of what you end up with less and less and less. You end up, it's, I guess, when I had open heart surgery, and it's amazing how things pare down very quickly. When I had to have that surgery, they did an angiogram. They told me right afterwards, you need immediate open heart surgery. Your wife is here. Your doctor is here already. So apparently I've been in and out of consciousness while they had done this. I go in the room. My wife was trying to smile and crying. My doctor was doing the golfer smile, like where you're frowning, but you're trying to smile. It was a bad combination. And they said, you need immediate open heart surgery. So we have to go into pre-op now, and we go into surgery in 36 hours. And I remember, so they mark your body up with magic marker where all your arteries are that they're going to harvest for the operation. And I'm standing in the shower after coming home from the hospital that night, and I just cry. And I fall on the floor of the shower, and the water's beating on my head, and I'm covered with magic marker. And then I get in bed with my wife that night, and I could see the full moon out the window, and suddenly I'm fine. I am fine. I am A-okay. I am not afraid. I am nothing. And I realized I just stepped over a portal, and I gave something up. And I gave up all that fear and the fact that I'm going to live forever. This could be the last day I'm on earth. And I was there with my wife. And the amazing thing was that morning, they do surgery in a phalanx, with several people at once. So all the open heart people come in at once. At like pre-dawn, there are like 12 of us there. And you were told by the hospital, you come with nothing. No glasses, no wedding ring, no nothing, no ID, nothing. And you come with a person who carries all that stuff with you. And so you're sitting in this waiting room with all the people who are getting open heart surgery with nothing. And you see them there calm, staring straight ahead. And the person who's with them is falling to pieces. They have the ID and everything. Civilization goes through that. You may not end up where you thought you were going to end up when you started your life, but all of it is a gift anyway. So you have to make the best of what you can make. I have so many dear friends in Portland and Seattle. I love those cities. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, how could that ever be the same? Even, no matter who wins in November, how can that city remain the same? Because a bond has been broken there of what you can expect in terms of safety. So I don't know how we survive, but from Adventures with God, I could leave on this note, is that you spend your whole life looking for the point on the horizon. And that point on the horizon is what guides you through all your troubled times. But then you get to the real crisis and you realize it doesn't do any good to find the point on the horizon. You got to look inside, and there's the point inside, and you look at that point and you can survive and you can live and you could find your way through it all. And that's what I found in my heart surgery. You have to find the point inside and focus on that.
We invite everyone who appears on the show who is comfortable doing so to close out the interview with a prayer. If you would like to, go right ahead.
A prayer for...
Whatever prayer is to you. Yeah.
Just based on what we said before, a prayer for our country.
Yes.
That's in Judaism. We do that during the High Holy Days. And I don't have the prayer book in front of me, but roughly it says, "Dear God, grant wisdom, strength, and courage to our leaders and those who work with our leaders to find our way through difficult times, to find the courage to make the right decisions, and to lead us all to safety and prosperity." Amen.
Amen. You can see Stephen in One Day at a Time on CBS starting Monday, October 12th at 9 p.m. Eastern and Pacific, and keep an eye out for the return of the Tobolowsky Files. His books, My Adventures with God and The Dangerous Animals Club, are available on Amazon. Thanks to Stephen for joining us, and a special thanks to friend of the show, Reggie Peralta, for helping arrange the interview. Next week, we'll speak with podcaster and writer Joanna Jewell about her conversion to Catholicism after venturing into the world of New Age and occult practices. Ordinary Grace is a conversation about the spiritual and religious life. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and rate on iTunes. Every rating and review helps another seeker find their way to us. And if you would like to join the conversation yourself, email us at ordinarygracepodcast@gmail.com or find us on Twitter @podcastgrace. Our theme music is by the band Silent Partner. The show is produced by Sean Woodard. Thank you for listening, and may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be free.